on? Well, first, thank you very much for the opportunity to participate today. I appreciate the opportunity to go through WIDA and CNI. I think this is a really important, it's not working. It's a really important opportunity. Okay, so I thanked WIDA and CNI for the opportunity to participate today. You know, I think what's clearly come across so far on the panel is that we are currently operating in two environments that definitely have some unknowns. And I think that does make some predictions difficult to make. At the same time, we also have some signs, I think, from both countries. I mean, as we've heard, there's this new interest in multilateralism and trade agreements in Brazil. And I think I wanted to make a few comments and some observations on the current administration to talk about so where we could draw some inferences on opportunities and on challenges. You know, it's no secret, obviously, that trade came under the microscope, perhaps more than ever in recent history in our election. And with that, we knew we would see some greater attention, and we've seen some anxiety about trade. I am still an optimist and do not think that means we are going to shut our doors, and that we still have opportunities for market opening agreements. The U.S. has pursued market opening agreements for over 70 years. You know, looking at candidate Trump's promises versus what's happened so far, I mean, he has delivered on a number of his proposals as a candidate on trade in terms of moving those processes forward. Yet there's still some uncertainty about the scope of what we'll be pursuing in the United States. So, for example, I think there were three large commitments that candidate Trump made. First, withdraw the United States from the TPP. Second, terminate or renegotiate NAFTA. And third, to identify and address all trade abuses. There's been steps or actual actions taken on all three. So obviously the United States did withdraw from TPP. We are renegotiating NAFTA. And as many of you know, there is an effort right now. There was a Federal Register notice seeking, not a Federal Register notice, executive order directing U.S. Department of Commerce and USTR to identify and provide solutions to addressing all trade abuses. In that context, though, I think there are some nuances that provide some opportunities in the trade relationship here. First, although the United States withdrew from TPP, that doesn't mean that we're going to eschew all trade agreements. This administration has said that they are looking to negotiate trade agreements and trade deals with countries, including the TPP members, such as Japan, but also even in the context of the EU or elsewhere. I think it was Secretary Ross who used the word that we're going to be looking to make incremental deals. So I think there's an opportunity to be very transactional here, looking to seek opportunities to advance the trade relationship. Second, I mean, obviously, we all know there's a big focus on this administration right now on U.S. jobs, and I thought that a lot of the comments by the panelists here and by my colleague next to me here about showing how important Brazil investment is in the U.S. and the job creation that is happening here in the U.S. is critical right now. You know, as has been already pointed out, there's no deficit in U.S. trade right now, and so that means Brazil is not under the microscope like there was that trade Federal Register notice seeking comments on the root causes of all trade deficits with our largest 15 trading partners with the largest trade deficits. So that's a positive in the sense that there's not that negative focus on Brazil right now with the trade deficit. I think also what's going to be really critical in the trade relationship is to look at NAFTA as a litmus test. You know, I think when I say there are unknowns and opportunities, it's a little unclear how far a NAFTA renegotiation will go. At the same time, the U.S. government has sought comments on basically all the aspects of a traditional trade agreement that the United States has, and on a number of issues that we've seen that were included also in TPP. So even though the administration might not be moving forward with TPP itself, at the same time, I think there are some of the issues that they've talked about. We've seen Ambassador Lighthizer of USTR and other administration officials talk about digital trade and IP, for instance, as being important priorities. And you know, I could see TPP being an important place to look to, not just because it's the most recent agreement that the U.S. had negotiated, but also when you think about the Alliance for Pacific,
3 of those countries have also signed on to important obligations, very robust obligations, that I think do help provide a bit of a roadmap of where there would be expectations in the United States in a trade deal with Brazil. I was struck by a comment, so yesterday Ambassador Lighthizer testified before the Senate Finance Committee, and I thought it was interesting how he described the U.S. trade policy agenda. He said this includes promoting U.S. sovereignty, enforcing U.S. trade laws, leveraging American economic strength, protecting U.S. intellectual property rights, and reducing America's trade deficit. So, I mean, no doubt, we've already talked about the importance of reducing the trade deficit to this administration. Others have mentioned a very significant increase of focus on enforcement. But what struck me about this comment is that of all the substantive areas we've talked about, that intellectual property is one of those 5 issues mentioned in terms of looking at rules and protecting US IP and promoting innovation. There's also the bias that I was a trade negotiator on IP and innovation, and I used to work at the Chamber where I led the international IP efforts. So that comment, of course, struck me, but also with a lot of the work we do with clients now, and I think when we talk about a roadmap of looking at issues that we could advance in the bilateral trade relationship, I thought I would just take a few minutes to highlight 3 or 4. I mean, I think more broadly, there were some important advice mentioned earlier on in terms of tariffs and taxes and local content. So I'm not saying that there are not a range of issues, and you can look to the U.S. Trade Barriers Report as a roadmap to see the types of issues that we would probably look to address that are really important to U.S. stakeholders and the U.S. government. But just to highlight a few concrete examples before I turn the mic back over, and happy to answer more questions. In terms of innovation, obviously the patent system is very important. It's been an ongoing, I think, bilateral concern with the U.S. that it takes almost 11 years to get a patent in Brazil. I think there's been important progress, as was mentioned here, some important progress with the patent prosecution highway, but I think this is an issue that continues to concern industries, and I know our clients, we hear about it across sectors. So hopefully there will be greater progress, greater autonomy given to INPI with financial autonomy to be able to process patents faster. And if you look at TPP, for instance, there's an obligation in there to seek to process patents in a more efficient and timely manner. So I think this is important when you look at what the expectations are from our trading partners. There's also been a long-standing concern for the pharmaceutical industry in terms of duplicative processes and patenting, and some confusion between the health authorities and INPI. I know there was an important agreement reached recently between Anvisa and INPI that actually helps provide much greater clarity, that INPI has the authority to look at patentability, and I think there's a lot of hope that that will finally break a 16-year logjam and see greater promotion of innovation in Brazil. Another issue is content protection. I know there's concerns about needing to step up efforts to protect against online piracy, and also more specifically a large concern about unauthorized filming in movie theaters. And I know Brazil was considering a law to criminalize that act, and I think something like that has been included. The obligation for criminal enforcement was in TPP, so another issue that is part of our modern day trade agreements. And then also really critical to innovation, critical I'm sure to Stefanini as well, is cross-border data flows. And I know that digital trade has already been mentioned as a huge issue, very important priority for this administration. TPP included groundbreaking provisions in that respect, required data, and our servers could not require that data or servers be located in the country. There's a lot of U.S. and other industries, multinational industries, really focused on this, and I think we would continue to see that as an important part of the U.S. trade agenda, regardless of how robust our trade agreements are going forward. But I do think IP and innovation is going to be important. I think looking at NAFTA is, as I said, an important litmus test. I think opportunities to cooperate between the U.S. and the Brazilian industry to promote innovation forward policies, not just bilaterally, but also multilaterally. Brazil, with its huge focus on innovation, really can help be a leader among emerging and more emergent economies, and in helping promote why IP is so important to innovation, and could be a real leader on that in the world stage, working in partnership with the United States. So I'll leave that there.
Thank you so much. everyone should be thinking of your questions. I will start with one. In this dynamic policy environment in the United States right now, where we really are experiencing an inflection point with respect to international trade, I find that it's super important, as each of the panelists has highlighted and given concrete examples of how we can do so, to be pragmatic and to focus on, what are the transactional objectives that we can pursue in our bilateral relationships to continue to advance. So I think that it's great that we are doing that and on a number of different fronts with Brazil. One of the silver linings that I see from this inflection point in the United States is a real vibrancy in South-South trade initiatives, and a number of them were highlighted here. Mexico and Brazil have spoken about trade in the past, but I think never, at least that I remember, with as much seriousness and vigor. I would love to hear either from Fernando or CNI or Stefanini, Monica, where do you think that will lead? Is this just a reaction to the United States pressing the pause button for a moment? Or do you think that this could lead to Brazil being more of a real strategic leader on trade in the hemisphere?
The negotiation of the agreement with Mexico and also sort of the deepening, as Constanza mentioned, the deepening of the broadening of the subjects we're dealing with Mexico, it predates actually this administration. Already when we were talking about Mexico, we were seeing it as a model. Mexico, TPP was still in play. We were seeing negotiating with Mexico on the terms of TPP. And so, for instance, in digital economy chapter, we had one IP. So we were trying to, Mexico was saying, look, we are going to be part of this deal, and if we're going to have this agreement, we should negotiate things along those lines. This predates the current administration, so I think it has already been the kind. It's part of that fundamental change in view that I spoke about, Monica spoke about, regarding trade. We're already pursuing that, and also pursuing also this modern or next generation deals with the Europeans too. Regarding leadership in a process, I think it's the question of necessarily. I don't think we should be seeking leaders. There's no need for one leader to sort of save the content, etc. It's just a question of pursuing common agendas. Right now we have a commonality of views, of agendas, which, if pursued, they'll yield positive results. We already have, formally you have in South America, you have by and large sort of zero tariffs for most of our trades and markets. The thing is how to make this more dynamic, how to make trade actually flow. So it is logistics, services. We need to harmonize regulations. So these things are being pursued sort of pragmatically. And I think if we start doing that, Brazil engages, and Mexico engages in other countries, a positive dynamic will ensue. And this will lead to sort of the two sides of the continent which have not been very active in trade, actually finding a way to do that, and also with Mexico.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you. Let me make 2 points, one specifically on Brazil, Mexico, and another one that is kind of tangential to some of the issues raised. The Brazil-Mexico point relates back to what Gina was saying with respect to NAFTA. Of course, there's been, a lot of, and I agree with Kellie, it seems like the talks between Brazil and Mexico have gained a level of seriousness that we haven't seen before. But I think the real test of that will be what happens with the NAFTA negotiations, because evidently, from the Mexican perspective, it is of course very useful to at this moment be saying, look, we can look to the south and we can look to our South American partners like Mexico or like Brazil and Argentina on the, in using the agricultural leverage card to basically make the point, we don't have to be as dependent. This is the Mexican speaking. We don't have to be as dependent on the U.S. on the agricultural side, which of course has very big implications for U.S. rural states and raises a lot of political economy issues. So there's potentially a level of posturing on the part of Mexico with respect to what we've been hearing in terms of, proximity to Mercosur and so on, that is still kind of hard to untangle. And I think we'll only be able to really untangle that once we see the NAFTA negotiations underway. The tangential issue that I wanted to raise, which is perhaps not that tangential, is that the TPP-11, so the TPP without the U.S., seems to be going forward. I mean, the countries that were invested in the TPP in the first place want to see it go forward. And here's where I think Brazil can't miss the boat. So I understand that, there's there's the EU-Mercosur deal that's been going on for years, and people want to see those negotiations terminated in a positive way. There are a number of other efforts that Brazil is pursuing, but Brazil has to be part of TPP 11, possibly 12. It needs to be engaged in those discussions at least. Because other countries will be, especially other countries in Latin America. So the prospects even for this greater South-South integration, perhaps, is directly related to whatever comes out of the TPP-11 effort.
And I think what the Pacific Alliance has done as far as positioning itself as a bridge from the Americas to PPP-11 has been very savvy. So that link that Brazil is really seeking and that Mercosur is seeking between Mercosur and the Pacific Alliance, I think is going to be critical in that. It's a great point.
Well, just very quickly, I think Monica and Fernando, they already replied in terms of Mexico and how this we will have to see. It can help to speed up a bit, but it wasn't due to that. Just a quick comment in terms to IP and cross-border data. I think that from the Brazilian perspective, and I think Gina mentioned, well, she explained even better than a Brazilian would do, the changes that have happened in terms of intellectual property within the domestic context in Brazil. But we still are looking into the special 301. That's something that we'll have to see. We're waiting that all those changes will reflect in terms of taking out Brazil from the list. Well, still we'll be waiting, paying attention to see how much the new approach in terms of trade will be reflected on the changes that Brazil has done. And just an information on the cross-border data flow, so the framework laws.
No, it's working.
They're currently being discussed in Congress in Brazil. So CNI and even a group with companies from abroad, they're really engaged into this process. And I'm not an expert into the issue, but they told me, and I trust them, that it's going in the right direction.
So first, I'd like to comment about NAFTA. We are all also concerned about this new negotiations or what will happen in the future with NAFTA. We have operations in Mexico, so we have some concerns about that. However, we prefer to work in a positive agenda in terms of bilateral relations. And as Fernando mentioned, we have a lot of subjects to be developed there. Technology is one of them, but we have defense, we have other subjects. And we are concerned with all these points in order to find the right people, the right channels to create an interchange of these subjects to move forward with that. So I think this is what we, in terms of private sector, we also are looking for, to see these subjects progressing between our countries. Another subject it's a little bit hard, tough to be discussed is how to avoid double taxation in our relations. So this is more difficult because we are discussing this so many years and we never achieve a final point in this discussion, but it's also important. However, the positive agenda, I think, is much more important at this moment to be discussed. So another point is, my colleagues already said, about intellectual property. We have signed an important agreement of PPH between our intellectual property agency, NPE, and USPTO. So, because I used to say that most of our software developed in Brazil is registered in USPTO. I have 2 patents here in USPTO. It's because this is much faster, and we need to protect our creation. So it's important to have this registered as fast as possible in Brazil. So today we expand 11, 12 years to have a patent registered there. So I think this agreement that we signed between both agencies was very important in order to accelerate this in the Brazilian side. And I think we have now to expand this agreement to many other areas. So this is what I consider that is important for this moment.
Great, well, thank you. I'll open it up for questions from the floor. If I could just ask, please introduce yourself, name and affiliation. And if your question is directed to one of the panelists, please indicate.
We'll have a mic runner, and if I can add to that,